and he's explaining it based on an illusionary level. What is Shavisa Shivyo? You'll be able to retake your captive. Whenever a person meets the challenge, the ultimate challenge regarding the Yetzer Hara, his spirituality is challenged and compromised. And then you do tshuva. You're able to recoup what you had lost. It's like retaking your captive. What was taken in captivity from you, you're able to retake because you become reinstated. And you will see in captivity this woman who has beauty. What is the Ashes, the wife? The wife who's Ifas Torah, Omar Ashes Somuch Pirush Nishmas Odom, is referring to the one soul. Ashes Torah is the soul of a person. Ken Asamach Mem Sholet Benefesh Asheterid Mato Umachnis Biodom. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, only has any level of influence on the person only once the soul goes into the body. And before the person is born and comes into existence, the evil inclination has no influence on the child. Mimenu lokho b'shevi. He takes that soul into captivity, meaning the moment the child was born, immediately it's under the influence of the evil inclination. V'hanefesh tikra isha. V'kor lezeh yifas Torah. And the nefesh, the soul, is called yifas Torah, the equivalent of a beautiful woman. Ki hanefesh yofe ad me'od. In its essence, it's something which is the ultimate beauty. El shemisnaveles b'masim aroim. It becomes soiled and unattractive through its evil actions. Uchshenutzer chayetzer. But when you have victory over your inclination, oz yaskel odom benafsho mayofe oman imay. Once you retake your soul, then you begin appreciating what real beauty is and what's correct and what's appropriate and what's proper. We studied the Maral on Pirkei Avos. The Maral writes, after the great flood, Hashem made a covenant with existence. He will never bring a great flood upon the world again to destroy it. Why? Ki yetzer lev odam ra min urav. The inclination of man is evil, min urav. What's min urav? From the moment he's cast from the womb of his mother, he's evil, meaning the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, only has influence on the child once it's cast from the womb of its mother. That's when the evil inclination is able to affect the child. So when does the evil inclination take charge or take that child captive? From the moment it's born. So Maral of Prague explains, it seems to be, but in utero, before the child comes into this existence, the evil inclination cannot take charge of that child, has no influence on that child. Why? She explains that because the child is in its development and it hasn't been fully formed as a human being, and it's only considered a human being once it comes out into existence, when it's cast from its mother's womb, only then does the evil inclination have the right that Hashem allow the evil inclination to have influence over the child. That's what he takes it captive. So he says something phenomenal. He says, but while it's in process, in development, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, cannot influence the child. So he explains, let's say a person in his lifetime, he's always in the developmental stage. He's always in movement. He never feels complete. Meaning you invest your life in Torah study, in mitzvah, and you only stop when you're not able to go further. That means there's never a moment you feel that you've achieved to the point that you've arrived. As a result of that, You're never complete. If you always live your life as you've never complete within the context of spirituality, the evil inclination cannot have any influence over you. It's only over the child or the person who's complete. It's like a person studies 2 hours a day. I think I've studied enough today. If actually you could study more, that person, the evil inclination has influence over. Why? Because the person feels he's reached a point, he's complete. But if a person invests every moment of his life, fully invested in Torah mitzvahs, and you never feel you're complete, and even when you go to sleep, when you take the break to eat, or to relax for a moment, you're taking the break not because you're finished, you're never finished, and the person never feels that he's achieved a level of completion, that person who lives his life in that context is not subject to the Yetzer Hara. It's only when we have those lulls, those moments that we feel we've done enough, at that moment, that's when we become vulnerable to the influences of the evil inclination. That's the Maharal of Prague in his commentary on Pirkei Avos. So he says, the soul is Eshes Vastor. It's the equivalent of the beautiful woman. It becomes soiled and dirtied only through the actions which are not appropriate. That's what happens. But he says, but once the Yetzer Hara is defeated, then the person has an appreciation for the beauty of spirituality. I'll give you an example. There's a certain person, not going to mention names, he meets people, and I've had great influence over his life over many years. And he says to people when they meet, he says, you see the rabbi, before I met him, he says, I was in the desert, I was in the dark, I didn't know where I was. He took me out of the desert. And he shares this with people openly. He says, meaning, now I appreciate who I am, what I am, and the opportunity I have available to me. Other people say, what are you bothering me? Whether it's charity, supporting certain causes. You know? They see it as a burden. It's a distraction. You know, it's archaic. It's backward. You're some kind of, caveman. You're an ancient Jew. But if a person understands, you take the upper hand, and you have the upper hand over the evil inclination, and you defeat him, he says, then now you're able to internalize and fully comprehend your good fortune of what you have. Every morning and before we start Psukei Zimra, we say, after Birchas HaShachar, we say, Ashreinu ma tov chelkeinu, o ma noim goraleinu, o ma yofer shesenu. We say, how fortunate we are, ma tov chelkeinu, how good is our portion, o ma yofer shesenu, how beautiful is our inheritance, o ma noim, and how pleasant is our lot. We rise every day, twice a day, and we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem. That's the good fortune. Do you know what it means? The creator of the universe took us to be his people. We say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. God is the creator of all existence. He wills all existence. But the only people who could say Elokeinu are only the Jews. No other nation can say Elokeinu. There's a personalization between Hashem and ourselves. So this is not Ashreinu, Matov Chelkeinu, Ma'anoim Goraleinu, Ma'yof Shurseinu. At the end of davening, at the end of it, we say, Aleinu Shabeach Ladon HaKol. We all give praise to the Master of all. He did not make us like the nations of the world. He did not put our portion like the families of the earth. And who are they, who are we? What they bow to, and lahavdu, what we bow to. The King of Kings, the Creator. That's who we bow to, what do they bow to? If a person has an appreciation, understanding of what that is, you're the most fortunate human being. But when do you appreciate that? You only appreciate it when you're victorious over the Yetzer Hara, over the inclination. Only then do you have an appreciation and you begin comprehending and internalizing how fortunate you are. Years ago, when grandmothers, they used to sing a lullaby to their grandchildren or even mothers, they would say, Torah is the best of schayra in Yiddish. Ernie's grandmother used to say it in German. Torah is the best of Torah. There's no better commodity than Torah. It's the best. It's the best commodity. The best is Torah. There's nothing better than it. What are they talking about? No, they tell over a joke, a story. There were a bunch of old ladies that got together, and each one wants to share and somehow boast about her grandchild. So the four of them meet and says, "So what is your grandchild doing?" Harvard Law. Oh, you must be very proud. Other one says, medical school. Oh, you must be proud. Another one says, you know what my son does? My grandson, he's in Oxford working on writings of Shakespeare that have never been seen the light of day. And he works in an attic, unventilated, and he has a lung problem because he inhales the bindings of the leather that have deteriorated, the dust, and the light is dim, and it even affects his eyes. And he gets 30 shillings a week, which you can't feed, an animal can't live on that. His level of sacrifice for Shakespeare, you must really be proud, working on Shakespeare's writings. And the fourth one says, you know what my son does? He sits and works on the ancient tomes of the Talmud in Lakewood Yeshiva. That's what he does. You must be really disappointing your grandson. That he's in Oxford working on Shakespeare's writings that whenever I made up the story myself, she's proud, and that he has failing eyesight, and he has a lung issue. You must be proud. But that you're mining million-carat deflawless diamonds, you must really be disappointed. You understand? As they say, the majority of people don't get it. But when you become victorious and you take control of your life, and this is Elucha ben Chorin, we discuss Elamisha Osi B'Torah, that's Choros Alaluchos. When you become free and you remove those shackles, it's like a person has a covering on his eye, and he has to have the operation. As long as that membrane's on the eye, you don't see light. But when they remove that membrane, and then all of a sudden you see light. Most people don't see light. We see through a lens that the lens is a colored lens, and everything's distorted. And he knows exactly how to distort those lenses. You know, you see pictures of these people. They go and they wear these 3D colored glasses. They sit in the movie theaters. Not that I've ever been there, but you see pictures, and they're looking, and it's like they took LSD. They have psychedelic experiences. They think they're walking on air and they're flying like Peter Pan used to fly. And these people think they've arrived. They haven't arrived yet, but they're going to arrive someday. But they're seeing through those glasses. They're not seeing reality. The evil inclination has the ability to distort that lens, puts lenses on us. We see life through his eyes, and we, God forbid, chas v'shalom, you see it through his eyes, it's disastrous. But when you're victorious over him, and you remove those distorted lenses, and you see it through that clear lens, then you see how fortunate you are. And that's what he says. He sees the soul, how beautiful and how pleasant it is, and what its value is, and what you're able to accomplish with that. Now finished. You will see the beautiful woman and you will desire her. Lo b'divrei yetzu pituyov yalbishem bo l'sakin lo b'muskolos v'ole olam hakayim shekulo tov v'omer uvevesel toch beisecho, and you will bring the soul into your home. L'fishalidei pitoi hara misrachekes hanefsh me'aguf. Through the seduction of the evil inclination, the soul separates, is distant from the body. This is very important. You know, there's a Ramchal that writes that initially when Adam was created, the soul dwelled inside the body. When the body became putrefied, the soul being so spiritual and holy, it separated from the body and it hovers over the head. The soul is not within the body. Initially, the body was the domicile of the soul. But because it became putrefied, the soul separated from the body, and the only other person whose soul is in his body is only Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu sanctified and consecrated himself to such a degree that his body was the equivalent of Adam before the sin. And therefore his soul could dwell within his body. But every other human being, the soul hovers above the head because of the reality of what the body represents, and especially what we add to it through our choices that we make. The soul separates and becomes more distant from the body. And he says, and it's what dwells in its place. What dwells in its place is the evil of the actions that we do. You know, the Ben Ish Chai, who was the leading Torah sage in Iraq, in Baghdad, passed away in I think 1910, and he wrote many svarim. He was a great Kabbalist, and he has one work on, it's like the equivalent of Mishalim. It's on allegories. And he goes to explain exactly who the evil inclination is. And he says, what is it analogous to? There was this knight. He was galloping into the main city, into the capital, and he's wearing his, he's on this steed, and he's a knight. He's very fit for battle, but he's coming back and he's soiled from the journey. So before he comes to the city, he goes down with his horse to the river, and he bathes in the river. And he takes off his clothing, and he's bathing in the river. And before he gets to the river, he meets an urchin on the road. He's going down the road, and the urchin asks him for a lift. And the urchin is dressed in putrid rags. So the knight is not afraid, because in terms of his strength and his training and his ability, this urchin is not going to threaten him. So he says to the urchin, he says, before I go into the city, I'm going down to the river to bathe. And then afterwards, we'll continue the journey. I'll bring you into the city, into the capital. So what happens? While the knight is bathing, what does this urchin do? He undresses, takes off his putrid rags, puts on the knight's clothing, gets on the steed, gallops into town like he's the knight. And the knight comes out of the river, and what does he have? He only has the rags. He's not going to walk into town naked. So he puts on the urchin's filthy, putrid rags, and he comes into the town, into the capital, and he starts screaming. He stole my horse, he stole my clothing, he's not the real thing. So the urchin says, there's something wrong with the man. He's an urchin, and all of a sudden he wants to be the knight. I'm the knight. I'm the one who's riding this. I'm directing this. He says the same thing with the Yetzer Hara. He comes and he creeps into your life, subtly, gradually, seduces you, and you welcome in because you believe he's something other than what he really is. And before you realize it, he takes over. And when he takes over, you become a stranger in your own house, and you no longer have control over your life. That's exactly what the Yetzer Hara is. It's this urchin who dupes the knight to believe that this is an innocent little nobody, and yet before he turn around, he's in control, he's in charge, and you become nothing. You have no control and no say in your life any longer. This is the victory, but once you have victory and you're back in the saddle, so to say, and you're directing your life, then it's a different reality.